Alexandria, Egypt. The year 34 BC. Mark Antony and Cleopatra sit on golden thrones, dressed as gods, distributing the entire eastern Mediterranean among their children. This is the exact moment Alexandria almost replaced Rome as the capital of the world. But what truly brought down this marvel wasn't conquest, but a slow poison of intolerance and a fear of knowledge. Today, on Vanished Cities, we're reconstructing the most sophisticated city of the ancient world at its absolute peak, a universal metropolis of 600,000 people, a lighthouse visible 50 kilometers out to sea, a library holding all human knowledge, and engineers building steam engines 1,800 years before the Industrial Revolution. We will walk streets where East met West, and uncover how this ancient wonder teaches us a profound lesson about the fragility of civilization. In April 331 BC, Alexander the Great stood on a narrow strip between the Mediterranean and Lake Maus. He had just conquered Persia and was about to found a city that would outlast his empire by 1,000 years. He ordered his architect, Dinocrates of Rhodes, to design the city. But Alexander never saw his masterpiece completed. Dinocrates designed it according to Hippodamian principles, a perfect grid. The main avenue, the Canopic Way, ran east-west for 5 kilometers, wide enough for 8 chariots abreast. In May 331 BC, weeks after founding Alexandria, Alexander marched east. He died in Babylon in 323 BC, at the age of 32, never having returned. His general Ptolemy, now ruling Egypt, made a calculated move. He intercepted Alexander's funeral procession and brought the body to a magnificent tomb at the city's heart. This wasn't grief, it was political genius. Whoever possessed Alexander's body possessed legitimacy, turning Alexandria into the ultimate pilgrimage site of the ancient world. Ptolemy I Soter, the savior, began construction. The Heptastadion, a massive causeway 1.2 kilometers long, connected the mainland to Pharos Island, creating 2 harbors, the Great Harbor to the east, and the Ionostos Harbor to the west. This transformed Alexandria into the Mediterranean's premier port. But Ptolemy wanted more than commerce, he wanted to make Alexandria the intellectual capital of the world. He proposed something audacious, a Maus Aion, a temple to the Muses, as a research institution. And attached to it, a library that would collect all human knowledge. The seed was planted. Alexander never saw his city, but from his tomb, a metropolis would rise that would dwarf anything the Greek world had imagined. By the reign of Ptolemy II Philadelphus, Alexandria had become the second largest city in the ancient world, with a population of 500,000 to 600,000. Only Rome was larger. But Alexandria wasn't just large, it was diverse, deliberately, structurally, and explosively so. The city was divided into 3 distinct ethnic quarters, each with its own character, governance, and tensions. The Bruchium, the royal quarter, occupied the northeast section along the waterfront. This was where Greeks lived, where the Ptolemaic palace complex sprawled across vast areas of marble columns and manicured gardens. The Maus Aion and library were here, alongside the gymnasium and the theater. Only Greeks held full citizenship and participated in governance. The Ptolemies, despite ruling Egypt for 3 centuries, spoke Greek, worshipped Greek gods, and deliberately maintained Hellenistic culture to exclude non-Greeks from power. The Jewish quarter occupied the northeast Delta district. Alexandria hosted one of the largest Jewish communities in the ancient world, perhaps 100,000 people. They had significant autonomy, governed by an ethnarch and their own council of elders. The community was prosperous, integrated into trade networks, and produced the Septuagint, the first Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, making Jewish scripture accessible to the Hellenistic world. The Egyptian quarter, called Rhodotis, occupied the southwest. This was where native Egyptians lived, the people who actually built this land, whose civilization stretched back 3,000 years. They had no citizenship rights, no political power. They performed manual labor, worked the docks, and served in Greek households. This cultural apartheid was deliberate, the Ptolemies maintained Greek dominance through systematic exclusion. This was the paradox of Alexandria, universal in ambition, segregated in practice. But what made Alexandria extraordinary wasn't just its diversity, it was its engineering. Rising from Pharos Island, visible from every point in the city and 50 kilometers out to sea, stood one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Pharos Lighthouse, commissioned by Ptolemy I and completed under Ptolemy II around 247 BC, redefined what humans could build. The architect, Sostratus of Cnidus, designed a 3-tiered tower, a massive square base to withstand Mediterranean waves, an octagonal middle section, and a cylindrical top housing the beacon. Height estimates vary, somewhere between 100 and 150 meters, making it among the tallest structures on Earth. White marble blocks were fitted with such precision they seemed to glow. But the real innovation was structural. The blocks were joined with molten lead poured into channels between the stones, creating flexibility that allowed the tower to sway slightly in earthquakes rather than crack. At night, a massive fire burned at the top, visible from approaching ships. During the day, a concave bronze mirror reflected sunlight, creating a beam that guided navigation. Some ancient sources claimed the mirror was powerful enough to set enemy ships on fire, though this is likely an exaggeration. Alexandria had replaced Tyre as the Mediterranean's premier trading hub. The great harbor buzzed with a mix of Greek, Egyptian, Aramaic, and Latin as merchants traded silk from the Far East, ivory from Africa, and grain from the Nile Delta. As the blinding white marble of the Pharos loomed above, just steps away in the gardens of the library, scholars were paid by the royal treasury to do nothing but think, research, and argue. The city thrived on difference. But difference without tolerance is a powder keg. And history was about to light the fuse. The Maus Aion wasn't just a library, it was the ancient world's first true research university. Founded around 305 BC by Ptolemy I on the advice of Demetrius of Phaleron, the Maus Aion was dedicated to the 9 muses, goddesses of arts and sciences. It was a temple, yes, but also a community of scholars given something unprecedented: salaries, free housing, tax exemptions, and the freedom to pursue knowledge without obligation to teach or produce immediate practical results. The Library of Alexandria, attached to the Maus Aion, had one obsessive goal: collect all human knowledge. Not just Greek texts, but all texts, from everywhere. The Ptolemies developed aggressive acquisition policies. Every ship docking in Alexandria's harbors was searched. Any scrolls found were confiscated, copied by scribes, and the copies, not the originals, were returned to the owners. The originals went into the library's collection. This is how you build the world's largest library, through scholarship, patronage, and occasional theft. Estimates of the collection size vary wildly, from 40,000 to 700,000 scrolls. The truth is probably somewhere in between, but even the conservative estimate represents the accumulated knowledge of centuries. The scholars working here became legends. Euclid wrote Elements, a geometry textbook that formed the foundation of Western mathematics for 2,300 years. Eratosthenes, the third head librarian, calculated the circumference of the Earth with stunning accuracy, an intellectual achievement unmatched for over 1,000 years. Beyond mathematics and astronomy, other scholars mapped the human nervous system, pioneered the first library classification systems, and developed foundational theories of physics and leverage. But perhaps the most extraordinary scholar was one you've never heard of: Hero of Alexandria. Hero taught at the Maus Aion in the 1st century AD. While Rome conquered with swords, Hero conquered with his mind. He didn't write philosophy or poetry, he built machines. The Aeolipile, Hero's engine, was the world's first recorded steam engine. A hollow sphere mounted on a central axis. Water inside was heated, producing steam that jetted out of bent tubes, causing the sphere to spin. It was a toy, a demonstration. But it proved that steam pressure could create mechanical motion. James Watt wouldn't build a practical steam engine until 1,800 years later. Hero designed automatic doors for temples. To the worshippers outside, the gods themselves were magically opening the gates. To Hero, it was just applied thermodynamics. Hero didn't stop at steam engines and automatic doors, he built the world's first vending machine, programmable automata, and wind-powered instruments, making first-century Alexandria the Silicon Valley of antiquity. While Europe fumbled in the Dark Ages centuries later, Hero was building steam engines and robots. The library and Maus Aion operated for centuries as the brain of civilization. Free inquiry. Cross-cultural exchange. The belief that all knowledge, from all peoples, deserved preservation. But brains are fragile. And Rome was coming. And Rome played by different rules. In 48 BC, Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria and stepped right into a civil war between 15-year-old Ptolemy XIII and his 21-year-old sister, Cleopatra. Caesar backed Cleopatra, a brilliant, multilingual scholar of the Maus Aion. In response, Ptolemy's massive army laid siege to Caesar's position in the royal quarter. Trapped with only 4,000 men against 20,000, Caesar made a desperate military decision: burn the Egyptian fleet anchored in the great harbor to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. The fire spread. Flames leaped from ship to ship, then to the wooden docks, then to warehouses filled with grain and papyrus scrolls. The blaze raged out of control, consuming parts of the harbor district. Did it destroy the library? For centuries, historians believed Caesar's fire incinerated 400,000 scrolls. But the evidence is ambiguous. The geographer Strabo visited Alexandria around 20 BC and mentioned the Maus Aion as a functioning institution. Scholars continued working there for centuries. Modern consensus suggests Caesar's fire probably destroyed warehouses containing scrolls awaiting cataloging, perhaps 40,000, but the main library survived. The real damage wasn't physical, it was psychological. Caesar's fire established a precedent: knowledge could be collateral damage in political conflicts. But Caesar's involvement in Alexandria produced something more consequential: an alliance with Cleopatra. She gave birth to Caesar Aion, Little Caesar, their son, who would later be declared pharaoh. Caesar returned to Rome and was assassinated in 44 BC. Mark Antony, one of his successors, took control of the eastern Mediterranean. And he, too, fell under Cleopatra's spell, though describing it as mere seduction misses the point. This was a political and military alliance between two of the most powerful people on earth. In 34 BC, after conquering Armenia, Antony staged a Roman-style triumph, but not in Rome. In Alexandria. The entire city was summoned to the gymnasium for the donations of Alexandria. Dressed as gods, Antony as Dionysus Osiris and Cleopatra as Isis Aphrodite distributed vast territories across the eastern Mediterranean among their children. They proclaimed Caesar Aion as King of Kings, making a bold statement to the empire. This was the moment Alexandria almost replaced Rome as the capital of the world. Antony was openly declaring that the future of Rome lay not in the west, but here, in this hybrid Greek-Egyptian metropolis, ruled by a Macedonian queen and a Roman general dressed as Eastern gods. The ceremony was a spectacular display of wealth, power, and arrogance. Tens of thousands of citizens packed the gymnasium, witnessing the spectacle on behalf of a metropolis of 600,000. The message was clear: Alexandria, not Rome, was the center of the new world order. But this hubris sealed their fate. In Rome, Octavian, Caesar's heir and Antony's rival, used the donations as propaganda. Antony had betrayed Rome, given away Roman territory to a foreign queen, and declared allegiance to Egyptian gods. The Senate stripped Antony of authority and declared war on Cleopatra. In 31 BC, Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra's combined fleet at the Battle of Actium. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Alexandria. As Octavian's forces approached in 30 BC, Antony committed suicide. Days later, Cleopatra died, probably by poisoning, not an ASP bite. Octavian, soon to become Augustus, the first Roman emperor, entered Alexandria victorious. Egypt became a Roman province, but a special one. It was the personal property of the emperor. No senator could even visit without imperial permission. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which had ruled for 3 centuries, ended. Alexandria, which almost became the capital of the world, was now a possession of Rome. But tolerance was eroding. And when religious fury exploded, nothing would survive. Under Roman rule, Alexandria's population remained stable around 600,000. The city continued its role as the Mediterranean's premier port. But now it served a new function, the Annona. The city became the heart of the Annona, Rome's grain dole. 1/3 of the wheat that fed Rome's million inhabitants flowed through Alexandria's harbors. If these massive grain fleets were delayed by storms, riots erupted in Rome. Rome conquered the world with legions, but Egypt fed those legions. Alexandria literally had the Roman Empire eating from its hand. But the city's ethnic powder keg was heating up. In 38 AD, the Jewish king Agrippa I visited Alexandria. His arrival sparked violent riots between the Greek and Jewish communities. Greeks mocked Agrippa, staged humiliating parodies, and desecrated synagogues. Jews retaliated. Roman authorities cracked down on both communities, but the damage revealed a truth: Alexandria's celebrated diversity was a facade. The 3 communities, Greek, Jewish, Egyptian, lived side by side but increasingly hated each other. The tensions were religious, ethnic, and economic. Greeks resented Jewish commercial success. Egyptians resented Greek political dominance. Jews feared both groups. And as Christianity spread through the empire in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, a new fault line appeared: pagan versus Christian, with Christians themselves divided between moderates and zealots. By the 3rd century AD, the library's glory days were fading. Imperial patronage decreased. Other cities built rival institutions. The Maus Aion still functioned, but it was no longer the undisputed brain of the world. Alexandria thrived on diversity. But diversity without tolerance is a powder keg. Rome lit the fuse in 48 BC with Caesar's fire. For 400 years, it smoldered. Then it exploded. On July 21, 365 AD, at dawn, the earth trembled. An earthquake, magnitude 8.0 or greater, struck off the coast of Crete, 400 kilometers from Alexandria. The shaking was violent but brief. Then something terrifying happened. The sea withdrew. The Mediterranean pulled back from Alexandria's shores, exposing the seafloor. Ships rested on sand. Fish flopped in the morning sun. People rushed out to gather stranded sea creatures, to explore this impossible landscape. The tsunami struck Alexandria with apocalyptic force. Walls of water crashed over the heptastadion, over the harbors, over the low-lying districts. Ships were picked up and hurled inland, some found later on rooftops of buildings 3.2 kilometers from shore. 5,000 people died in minutes. The Bruchium, the royal quarter, was hardest hit. The marble palaces where Ptolemy's and Cleopatra's once ruled were smashed. Over the following centuries, weakened by seismic liquefaction and rising seas, the entire northeastern waterfront would gradually sink 6 meters into the Mediterranean. Cleopatra's palace disappeared beneath the Mediterranean, swallowed by the sea. The tsunami didn't destroy Alexandria, but it drowned the city's heart, the royal quarter where Cleopatra almost made Alexandria the capital of the world. Meanwhile, the Pharos Lighthouse, the wonder that had stood for over 1,000 years, began its own slow death. Weakened by centuries of relentless seismic activity, including massive earthquakes in 1303 and 1323, the 1,600-year-old structure finally collapsed. Only a broken stub remained of the tallest lighthouse ever built. The city rebuilt, but it was a diminished Alexandria, traumatized and increasingly divided by religious hatred. In 391 AD, the Christian Roman Emperor Theodosius I issued a decree: all pagan temples in the empire were to be closed or destroyed. In Alexandria, the Christian patriarch Theophilus seized the opportunity. He incited a Christian mob to destroy the Serapeum, the great temple to Serapis, the hybrid Greek-Egyptian god. The Serapeum housed a subsidiary library, sometimes called the daughter library, containing thousands of scrolls. The mob burned it. The statue of Serapis was pulled down and hacked to pieces. The temple was demolished, stone by stone. This was the moment the Library of Alexandria truly died, not from Caesar's accidental fire 400 years earlier, but from deliberate religious violence. In 415 AD, the violence reached its ultimate expression. Hypatia, a brilliant mathematician, astronomer, and the city's most prominent intellectual, was targeted. A Christian mob, incited by Cyril, the Patriarch of Alexandria, dragged Hypatia from her chariot, stripped her, and tore her apart with broken pottery shards. Her dismembered body was burned. Hypatia's murder symbolized the death of intellectual tolerance in Alexandria. The city that once invited all scholars now killed them for teaching the wrong philosophy. In 641 AD, Arab-Muslim forces conquered Alexandria. The new rulers moved Egypt's capital south to Fustat, which would become Cairo. Alexandria, once the second largest city in the world, lost its political significance. Trade routes shifted. The population collapsed. By the late Ottoman period, Alexandria was a fishing village with 10,000 inhabitants. In 1994, underwater archaeologists Jean-Yves Empereur and later Frank Gaudio dove into Alexandria's harbor. They discovered massive blocks of marble and granite, pieces of the Pharos, resting on the seafloor. Statues. Sphinxes. Columns from Hellenistic temples. The royal quarter, submerged since 365 AD. The Pharos still exists, it's just underwater now, broken into 10,000 pieces, scattered across the Mediterranean floor. Those sunken stones are the physical ghost of a miracle. A city of 600,000 people. A lighthouse that stood for 1,600 years. The birthplace of the steam engine. Alexandria proved you could gather all human knowledge, build towers touching the sky, and have different cultures living side by side. But as the ashes of the Serapeum and the tragic murder of Hypatia showed us, Alexandria also proved something darker: knowledge is fragile. Tolerance is fragile. Civilization itself is fragile. Alexandria didn't die from one catastrophe. It died from 1,000 cuts across 700 years, each one chipping away at what made it universal. Today, the Pharos lies underwater. The library is ash. Alexander's tomb, lost forever, never found. Cleopatra's palace, 6 meters below the Mediterranean. But the idea survives. Every library descends from Alexandria. Every lighthouse echoes the Pharos. Every attempt to gather human knowledge, from Wikipedia to the Internet Archive, is Alexandria reborn. We keep rebuilding it because we know what we lost. Alexandria did not die by a conqueror's sword. It died when its own inhabitants decided that being right was more important than preserving knowledge. If you enjoyed this, there are many more vanished civilizations to explore. Tell me in the comments, which city should I reconstruct next? Until the next journey.